Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening. So, I started to take the liberty of looking at this site called TV One, and it talks about all of the entertainers in the Black community. And I thought it was pretty interesting because I remember I used to just go on YouTube, and there's this series that used to come on called the Unsung people that were involved in the music industry and entertainment industry in the Black community. And you'd see all these stories that were really interesting, and you'd find out the lives of these people and their personal lives and some of the unfortunate things that have happened to them, that have caused for their decline in either their work of music, um, maybe how they died, their demise, or maybe some of the scandals, some of the things that have happened in their musical career, maybe things that have happened in the music industry that have happened to a number of artists where they might have had a large asset, but they were cash poor. They lost a lot of money through theft, um, people not really giving them their credit just due or their credibility for their skills and stealing things from them. And so there's a lot of things that have happened to a lot of musical entertainers. And what I thought was amazing is just seems like it's a lot of the Black entertainers that a lot of the tragedies have happened. And so it's pretty sad. And I noticed that, a lot of that is prevalent. And it's just in the Black community. I've seen a lot of, these stories play out, and they all seem to be very sad, Prince, Michael Jackson, even, TV stars, Bill Cosby, some of these people that you knew as you were growing up, and they're really popular, and you see that they just seem to go down in flames, in a sad way, and or there's some kind of tragedy that happened or resulted as to why they died, and or something happened in their life that was pretty traumatic that caused them to no longer want to be involved with the music industry. And I noticed a lot of that had happened. And I noticed a lot of the videos on social media of Illuminati and all these crazy things, these concepts people are coming up with. I don't know if that all plays a part in it. So, to my understanding, the Illuminati, I guess it's like sort of like this cultish group where people have to pretty much sell their soul to the devil, or pretty much they're giving their self over to this cult group, and they kind of do all these horrible things, and it's all so that they can catapult themselves to fame and fortune, and all based on money. And so that's my way of thinking, that it has something to do with that. And then there's this cult and this group of people who are in collusion together to create this conspiracy, surrounded by this concept called Illuminati and stuff. So they usually use that a lot in the Black community. It's been talked about, all these different groups. Now, I'm not saying that isn't a possibility. I do believe there is something going on because there's so many artists that it seems like they were big in the 80s, they were big in the 90s, and you want to see they have a happy ending. Oh, they retired, and then they're living a lush life, or they're living a peaceful life. They're no longer in the music industry. They're living with their family, and they're comfortable. No, it's they died because of a drug overdose, or they had all this money and they lost all their money. They become homeless, or they had extreme drug problems, and they they ended up in jail, or they ended up owing money to the IRS. All kinds of stuff that you find out, and it noticed that history repeats itself. And what we didn't have as when we were growing up, we didn't have the internet, and we didn't have the cell phones, and we didn't have a lot of these things that you all as young people have now to access information. So I took the liberty. I was looking this up. I've heard of the concept and I never really gave it any second thought. I knew about it, but I feel like this revolution is repeating itself, the sexual revolution. And I believe that plays a part in to why we're seeing a lot of media talk about, homosexuality and talk about, um, these relationships, divorce, breakup, people getting together, marrying. We have these shows called The Bachelor, The Bachelorette. So the sexual revolution was also known as a time of sexual liberation, and it was a social movement that challenged traditional codes of behavior related to sexuality and interpersonal relationships throughout the US and subsequently the wider world. From the 1960s to the 1980s, sexual liberation included increased acceptance of sex outside of traditional heterosexual monogamous relationships, primarily marriage, and the normalization of contraceptive and the pill, public nudity, pornography, premarital sex, homosexuality, and alternative forms of sexuality, and the legalization of abortion all followed. And here you have Marilyn Monroe in the 1953s. She's with Hugh Hefner, who founded the Playboy magazine. The first edition featured a nude photo of Marilyn Monroe, who was the rising about the sexual revolution. And so it's basically repeating itself again, folks, in real time. So the term sexual revolution has been used at least in the late 1920s. Some early commentators believe the sexual revolution of the 1960s through the 1980s was in fact the second such revolution in America. They believe that the first revolution was during the Roaring Twenties and World War I, and it included writers such as F. Scott Fitzgerald and Edna St. Vincent Millay and Ernest Hemingway. So, however, the age of changes in the perception and practice of sexuality that developed around the 1960s was to reach the mainstream America and the most of the Western Europe and the parts of Asia. Indeed, the available quantitative evidence demonstrates the measure of non-traditional sexual behavior. Examples like gonorrhea incidents, birth out of wedlock, and births to teenagers began to rise dramatically in the mid-late 1950s. It brought about profound shifts in attitudes to women's sexuality, homosexuality, premarital sexuality, and the freedom of sexual expression. So psychologists and scientists such as Willem Reich and Alfred Kinsey influenced the revolution, as well as literature and films and social movements of the period, including counterculture movement and the women's movement and the gay rights movement. And the counterculture movement contributed to the awareness of radical cultural change that was the social matrix of the sexual revolution. So there were films that were put out as well. They were exotic films. One director, such as Andy Warhol, he did adult exotic films. That one in 1969 called Blue Movie, he directed it. And then there was a depicting of explicit sex to receive wide theatrical release in the US. And so the film was a seminal film in the golden age of porn, and it helped inaugurate the porno chick. So the phenomenon in the modern American culture. So during this time, porn was being publicly discussed by celebrities and taken serious by critics. So according to Warhol, the Blue Movie was a major influence in the making of The Last Tango in Paris, an internationally controversial erotic, exotic drama film such as starring Marlon Brando. He was in it, and it was released a few years after the Blue Movie was made. And then there's this historic, well, I'll say now it's going to be a part of history. All of these movies, all these things, these movements are part of history. And then this film called Deep Throat, which achieved major box office success despite it being a rudimentary by the mainstream standards. So if you look at some of these things, this stuff has happened way before we got here. And so it's crazy. It's like a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these things that we're seeing are a repeat of history. You know, I guess the reason why I'm saying this is because there are young people, I was seeing them upset and perturbed by a lot of these things, but a lot of this stuff has already been here. It just is now, it's being rebirthed or re-promoted again with a newer generation of people. So the role of mass media plays a part in it. And so, you know, like I feel like too, the you know, we have the opioid crisis and the decline in the birth rate of white babies. And I believe that's the reason why they're trying to be hard line on abortion. That's my opinion. That's what I'm seeing, you know, because when they put in the Pew Research statistical data that, you know, the birth weight rate of white babies was declining, I believe that's when that thing in an abortion, putting stricter laws on it, came into effect. Um, and so with the gay rights movement, this was always here. So in the 1969, there was the Stonewall riots. And so that crystallized a broad grassroots of mobilization of the homosexual movement. New gay liberationists gave political meaning to coming out by extending the psychological personal process into public life. So it here in the 1950s, the most feared thing of the homosexual culture was coming out. And so the homosexual culture in the 1950s did everything they could to help keep their sexuality a secret from the public and everyone else in their lives. But Alfred Kinsey researched homosexuality alleged that 39% of the unmarried male population had at least one homosexual experience to orgasm between adolescence and old age. So by gay liberationists making coming out public, they helped mobilize people to live full time and homosexual as a homosexual, and they no longer had to live in secret. So homosexuals could now enjoy sexual relationships, encounters, and desires, or force themselves into a homosexual relationship. They no longer had to sneak around and occasionally receive sexual attention that they desire or force themselves into a heterosexual relationship in which they had no interest, and it was full of lies. So that's why I believe this upsets people who are in relationships and they know they're gay and they've been closeted all their life. They've had to hide this from their family and their friends and their job and all this stuff. A lot of times some people fear they're going to lose a lot. So when you see people that are saying they're coming out and they want to be honest about who they are and all this, it scares the hell out of people like that. And they're going to deal with it one of two ways. They're going to say, you know what, I'm just going to come out. But then some people are saying, no, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose my livelihood. So they become angry and enraged. And then they want to hurt everybody that's gay, or they want to say or preach against gay because it's their problem. They're personally struggling with that. And so anything that has to do with this culture, they harp on it in a negative way, and then they can also hurt themselves. They can commit suicide because they have to see people live happy, something they wish or desire to do and they could never do it. And so I've never known people who have, if they are not gay, to be this upset with people who are gay. But I have known people who are gay and they've hidden it to be upset when they see people living their lives like this and they can't do it because they've worked so hard to hide who they are, that, oh man, this person is living this way. Oh no, we can't have that. So they're going to do all this stuff to talk about these people, make these people ostracize or feel ostracized because they can't be comfortable in their own skin. Then you have feminism, which was always here. It is not a new concept, folks. And despite what people have said, they say that it is a white person that created. Let me tell you something. Feminism, the way I look at it, is it's you have a strong woman. She wants to go out and get an education. She wants to be able to take care of her household and her family. It's not that you're out looking for men to bash and beat up on and talk bad on, as some of these videos have been put out. It's more, women's liberation movement. You're trying to be a strong woman and promote womanhood and what have you. Now, there are people who are extremely radical with it. There's different levels of feminism, different type of feminists. And so everybody is not the same. And so, like here, it says coinciding with the second wave of feminism, the women's liberation movement initiated in the 1960s, the sexual liberation movement was aided by feminist ideologues in their mutual struggle to challenge traditional ideas regarding female sexuality and queer sexuality. So there were some women who were gay. And so, what do you expect some women to do? Now, not all women are gay. Not everybody is gay. Just because you see this doesn't mean that everybody's gay. Everybody isn't gay. But what makes this really frustrating is that when you see media, white media, or mainstream media, or people who are controlling media push these ideals at you constantly, it can become annoying and it can become a turnoff. I think that's what some people are discrediting some of these things for. But what I noticed is the elimination of undue favorable bias towards men and objectification of women, as well as the support of women's rights to choose their sexual partners free of outside interference or judgment. There are three of the main goals associated with sexual liberation from feminist perspective. So since during the early stages of feminism, women liberation was often equated to sexual liberation rather than associated with it. Many feminist thinkers believe that the assertion of the premise of sexuality would be a major step towards the ultimate goals of women's liberation. Thus, women were urged to initiate sexual advances, enjoy sex, experiment with new forms of sexuality. And so, feminist movement insisted that the focus on sexual liberation for women, for both physical and psychological, the pursuit of the sexual pleasure for women was the core ideology, which subsequently was to set the foundation for female independence. So it's more about an independent thing too. Women have a libido. Men are not the only one with libidos. Men have sexual preferences. Women have sexual preferences too. They want to, they want to feel good too. It shouldn't be all the men feeling everything. So, there's a lot going on here that people are not telling you about. Yes, there are radical feminists, but everybody's feminism is not the same. It's not ideal. I like what you call the same, like identical. The belief set is not identical. So everybody has a different take on it, of course, because everybody is their own individual, So the thing that I do notice is that with this, I notice in the Black community now, I'm going to focus on this, it's always put on white women as they're the fault of feminism. It's always put on Black women as they're the fault when something goes wrong in the home, or there are kids that are by themselves. The woman is raising kids by herself in the Black community. It's the woman's fault. She gets a disease. It's the woman's fault. Men can go out and sleep around and have, this vagina, that vagina, and sleep with different women and do whatever they want and get away with it. And women can't do anything. They got to be with the kids. They got to raise the kids. They got to listen to the male. They got to do what he says. Take abuse, take physical abuse, take emotional abuse, and just be the woman and be in the house and raise the kids and not do anything, not say anything, not be upset if he sleeps around. He's got other women everywhere and babies everywhere. And if you get a disease, it's your fault. You did it, not him. Even though he's sleeping around, he feels he's going to miss something. So he can't be with this one person only. He has to be with all these other people because he was taught that being a Mac Daddy, a pimp, a player, and a hustler is about your manhood and is about sleeping with all these different females and having sex with all these different women. And you're gonna miss out. And if you don't get all these different women, then you're not a man. So this is what is in the minds of some of these black males that were taught this. And so, no, what did I say something wrong? That's what was taught to them. We have movies to back it up, black exploitation movies that basically put out, males were they sexually inclined, and they had all these women, and they're the player, the mag daddy, the pimp. We had all these cool movies. Even I'd be honest, I something look at black exploitation movies. Pam Grier. The women have to be sexy and all this, and so we grew up in that era. So some people can't separate fantasy from reality. And so they see this and they want to be this. They see this in their neighborhood. And if you're coming from a community where there's a lot of poverty, and the men that are really getting the money and they're getting the recognition and the notoriety are the drug dealers and the pimps, who do you want to be like? Your dad, he's working hard, he's staying home with the kids and the woman, and he's not messing around, he's not making much money, and he's struggling, and he's always complaining. And then you got these pimps, they got these nice cars, and these hustlers, and these players, and these drug dealers, they got nice shoes, nice clothes, they got all these women they're sleeping with. So what do you think the boys are going to look? And so what do you expect? I mean, which it's sad, and it doesn't give a right for people to be rude and to mistreat women and to abandon their responsibility as being a father. But this has been promoted so much that, like I said, media has promoted a lot of stuff. They promoted that in the black community. And so black men see that, and that's how they treat their women. And so if some of the ones that grew up in this time that saw that and thought this was okay, that's the message you're being sent. So what do you expect for them to do? And then let's not forget, you got mass incarceration and crack put in neighborhoods to basically destroy families. And then you have we saw this, everybody, the world is watching. They saw Philando Castile. You have incidences like that where here you have a man, he's doing the right things. He's with his girlfriend, he's with his baby. But look what happened to him. Now that baby doesn't have a father, and so they always blame the woman. So it is not always the woman's fault. That's my point. It's not always the woman's fault. There's always a story. Every case is different, but there's always a story behind it. And then you have some women who the father, he was there, he lied, he said he wanted to marry her, or maybe he never said he wanted to marry her. He wanted to stay there and help her with the kids, and then he disappears because he can leave, she can't. She has those kids, she has to stay there and raise those kids, so she can't find him, doesn't know where he's at, so she has to they force you. They would automatically, well, you got to give up a name of your baby's father. Some women wouldn't do that. It's like, oh, well, you got to sign this. If you're going to get public assistance, you got to sign these papers, because otherwise, if you don't give us the name of your baby's father, then you won't get public assistance. So you won't be able to feed your kids, clothe your kids, do the stuff you need to do to survive, unless you give up the baby's father's name. And so even if you give up the baby's father's name, you don't give them any other details about this person. But somehow they find out who he is. They find out. I don't know how they do it. They're extreme when they do this detective searching on who these people are. And then now child support intervenes because they want money. Because if this is taxpayers' money and you're getting public assistance for these kids that you're raising, we want our money back. So we want him to pay. Yeah. So the black men get mad at the woman instead of the system of what's going on. And so that further causes a wedge and divide in the community between women and men, and in this gender war that they had going on here. And so they didn't get it. You know, these women are not signing up for this. Some of them did, of course, because they couldn't find the fathers. They couldn't find where these people were. You know, he left, he moved somewhere and disappeared and abandoned his responsibility. So I have to do all this hunting around. I don't know where he is. So when they put the name down, they're able to find him and make him pay. He's got this good job. He's got a wife. He's got kids somewhere else. He abandoned you with the kids. And then this wife doesn't find out that he had kids prior to them having, is not, some people won't mention to you, but this is what has happened. Some of this you can see it. Some of it's been, you know, some bad situations where the father is there, but he's taken out of the home because he's locked away, or he had some trumped up charges put on him or some drugs planted on him. He didn't do it, but because he's black, he got arrested. Now he's in there and he can't get out of jail, or he can't get out of prison. And so these are things that people are not saying. This is the reason why there is some women that are there with their kids and they are the mother, father, and they have to raise the kids. So, you know, I don't know why they don't talk about this enough, but those are just a few of the reasons. You know, there's some people who, you know, there's some women who are, you know, promiscuous, and they slept around with different people and different partners, and they don't know who their baby's dad is. And so there's this thing that was promoted, um, that people are not aware of, but there's also a thing called polygamy, the practice or custom of having more than one wife or husband at the same time. And then there's polyamory. There's one called polyamory, and there's a polygamy religion where you can have more than one wife, more than, you know. And so here we have here polyamory, the philosophy or state of being in love or romantically involved with more than one person at the same time. Now, how many people know of this? Okay, so this is the P on the end of the LGBTQ. This one guy was preaching on, see, they put a P on it. That means pedophile. No, it doesn't mean that. It means polyamory or polygamy. And that, my friend, has to do with people who they're not necessarily gay. They can be straight and they just have multiple partners, as you see here. They have many partners, many people that they're having sexual encounters with. And so this is, in some ways, some people find this perfectly normal. And so you don't see enough people talking about this, of course, because they may be, in fact, in it. And then you have open marriages. And so a lot of this stuff has actually been going on. It's just now it's being brought to the forefront more openly, and it's shared more openly. Now, not necessarily any of these people, you can assume that they're not necessarily gay, or but they could possibly be bisexual. They could possibly be in those type of relationships. People are not aware that these things are going on as well. And so they have dating sites for people who are involved in this. And so recommended websites for people who are into polyamory. And so this is here. It's all over the place. And so it's in all the different dating sites. You can specifically say that that's what you're involved in. Polyfamilies, polyamory, polycomics, stuff like that. So these are things I think that people need to explore before they open their mouth and start talking about all these other things that they're not aware of, that this concept is not new. It has been around. And some people, you may think, oh, okay, is it me? Is the why that they won't be faithful? There's a big problem with infidelity too. And I don't think it's just in the Black community. It's also in other communities. Other groups have a problem with infidelity, but a lot of it too is hiding who they really are. Some of this is that people want to be in multiple relationships and they're not being honest, and they're a part of these polyamory groups and people don't even realize it. And so polygamy, like, or polygamy is what we would say it. And so the condition of bearing some male and some female and sometimes perfect flowers on the same plant, that's in the botany world, okay? But in the regular world, like us, the practice or custom of having more than one wife or husband at the same time. So you see, this is polygamy right here, and it's supposed to be banned. But you see, some people live like this. This one man, he's married to all these women. And so some people live like this and they know who all of the partners are. And so nobody says anything about that. It's okay when it's a guy doing it, but what if it was the other way around? So these are things that I don't think people even really thought about. And so this is also, I guess, would be considered part of the sexual revolution as well. And so they say they're sister wives. Family loses polygamy. So I guess maybe they got in trouble. Maybe, you know, I know in some countries, some places, you can go to jail. The person can go to jail if he's married to this many women. And so some men think it's okay. Some women may be okay with this. It is too in history. There were countries, even in Africa, where it was looked at as this was normal, you know, but the man could afford to raise all of his family. There's a difference here. It's not just this guy is willy-nilly going out sleeping with all these different women because it puts a notch on his belt and makes him the man or the player, the Mac Daddy. It was more of a cultural thing where it was part of the living situation because financially he could do that. And so in this country, it's outlawed. It's like, you know, it's supposed to be a man and a woman, or now, of course, woman, man, man. There are two parties involved in a marriage. So this is the kind of thing that is going on. I don't think people really talk much about, but this is all part of the sexual revolution. And who knows what could happen, you know. You never know until you read about stuff, all of the different things that exist. But with that being said, there is a lot more to be explored in the whole ideology of, you know, people coupling, getting together, what has happened before, you know, we got here, on down to, you know, the way, you know, media portrays certain people. And so it's just, you know, these things right here are not anything new. But anyway, with that being said, like, comment, subscribe, and thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you wholeheartedly.